Hello, everyone. I welcome you all to Scalar Academy's YouTube channel. So, for this live session, we are going to focus on some of the Python fundamentals, and then we'll take up some of the questions from the chat as well, right? So, 1 hour dedicated session entirely on Python. And I want this session to be quite interactive. So, if you have any questions, any feedback, please put it up in the chat window and I shall definitely take it up. So also before I start off, just give me a quick confirmation if you can hear me, right? So if you can hear me, just give me a quick thumbs up in the chat or just let me know, just write down a quick yes in the chat so that we know that everything is good to go. So I'm just waiting for you guys to give me a quick confirmation. Great. So seems like we've got a lot of yeses over here. That's awesome. Right. So all of you are welcome to the session. Venkat, Punita, Rajesh, Health Effect team. Awesome. Great. So all of you can hear me properly. All of you can see me properly. That's amazing. Okay. Also, let's just let me know in the chat how many of you have brief idea on Python, right? How many of you are not complete beginners and have basic idea of Python syntax? So on that note, Gulshan says yes. Great. Great. Okay. Healthific team says I have so many doubts. Venkat Sai Reddy, I have sir. Awesome, awesome. So today's live session would be dedicated to complete beginners, right? So let's say if you now, even if you're from a non-coding background or if you're from a non-tech background, that shouldn't be an issue at all because I'll be covering all of the Python fundamentals from scratch. And after that, if you have any questions, we'll also take them up. So if you have any questions, please keep putting them up in the chat window. I'll take them parallelly. Right. Now, what exactly is Python? It's a programming language. That is something which we all know. But what is it that makes Python different from other programming languages? Well, the answer is quite simple. It's an object-oriented programming language, but it's just not just that. With the help of Python, you can do multiple things. And now, with the help of Python, you can implement web development, you can create games, you can also have ML applications and deep learning applications with Python. So not just limited to one particular thing when it comes to Python. So now that is clear, the first step which we do in any programming language is to print something out on the console, isn't it? So right now what I have over here is known as Jupyter Notebook. So again, if you have worked with other programming languages, now that could be any other programming language, right? It could be C, C++, Java. Now what happens is if you're using a programming language, you need an environment to write your code. So if you're using Java, you normally use Eclipse. Similarly, if you're using C or C++, you normally use dev C++. So here, since that I'm using Python, there are multiple IDs present. And right now what I'm using is one such ID, which is called as Jupyter Notebook. So now that this is clear, we have Jupyter Notebook opened up here. All I want to do is print out something on the console. So the command is extremely simple. All I have to do is write down print. I'll give in these braces over here, and inside this, let me just write down welcome. Let me write the spelling properly. Welcome to this Python session. Pretty simple, isn't it? Now, as you see, as I've executed this statement, you have the result welcome to this Python session. So extremely simple. If you have to print something out on the console, all you do is use the print statement and it will automatically be printed out over here. Hey Pratyush, welcome to the session. Venkat says I'm from non-coding background. Sure, no issues. So if you stay till the end of this live session, I'm sure you will learn the fundamentals of Python. So right now, what we've done is print out a print out a very simple statement onto the console, right? So if you want to learn coding, then you've taken the first step. And now, after this, what do we want to do? Well, now whenever you're working with any programming language, what are you doing? You're working with data. And now, if you're working with data, you'd have to store that data somewhere, isn't it? And this is where variables come in. So again, if you're working with any programming languages, whether it is C, C++, Java, whether it could be Golang, it could be any other language, every language has something called as a variable. Now, what exactly is that variable? This variable is a temporary storage space. And what do you do with a temporary storage space? Well, obviously, you store something. And now, if you go to the kitchen in your house, you have these handis, right? Handis or bartans. Now, what do you do? So, let's say for one particular week, I have a bartan, and in that bartan, I store sweets. Now, since I'm hungry, I eat all of those sweets which are present in that bartan. Now, after that, let's say I buy a couple of Maggie packets. So, I take those Maggie packets and I store those Maggie packets in that bartan. Now, again, next week, I'm again hungry. I eat up those Maggie packets. Now, what next? Well, again, since I'm hungry, I buy a couple of chips packets from the supermarket and I take those chips packets and store them into the burton or the box or whatever you call it. So, here, this burton or this box is basically your variable. And this is a variable because this is only a temporary storage space. Now, I call this a temporary storage space because whatever we are storing inside it can be changed at any point of time. So let's say today in that box, if I'm storing a chips packet, now after eating that chips packet, I can go ahead and store something else. It's not necessary that I have to store only that chips packet inside it. So that is why these are called as variables, because we can keep on changing the values or the items which are present in these variables. So very simple analogy to understand what exactly a variable. So now that we know this, let's go ahead and store some values inside the variables. So here I'll just have something called as var1, and inside var1, let's start off with numbers, right? Because numbers are the simplest form of data. So I'll have var1 is equal to 1. Now what I've done over here, I just stored the value 1 inside this. Let me print this out. Print of var1. Let me take it back over here, and as you see, I've stored the value 1 inside var1, then I've printed it out. Similarly, now what I'd want to do is, since this is a temporary storage space, I can go ahead and change the value. So now I'll have var1 is equal to 2. Now I will print out var1 again for you guys, and as you see, the value of 1 has been changed to 2. Similarly, I can go ahead and store any other value over here. So now I'll have var1 is equal to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Or maybe even I'll add 6 over here. Print of var1, and what do you see over here? Let me print it out properly. Let me remove the space over here. And as you see, I've printed out 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So very simple stuff. What are we doing over here? We are just changing the values which are stored in this variable and we are printing it out. So we know what exactly is a variable. We know what the values we are storing inside it. Now, again, understand that data can be of different types. So when you're working with variables, you have something called as a data type, because you can have data in the form of integers, you can have data in the form of string values or characters, you can have data in the form of Boolean values, you can have data even in the form of complex values. So this is where, when it comes to Python, the data type of the variable is dependent on the value which you store inside this. So till now we've worked with variables. Now what I'll do is, let me just go ahead and add a comment and I'll call that as data type. Now what is a data type? So let me actually cut these out. Let me make more space over here for you guys to see this properly. And now let's say if I again have something called, so I have a variable called as a. Inside this, I'm storing the value 10. Now I would want to check the type of this variable. So I will pass in the variable a inside the type method, and as you see, I get this int. What is int? Int is basically the type of value which I've stored inside this. And since this is an integer value, the variable is also an integer type. Now let me change this. This time what I'll do is I'll store a string type value. This time I'll have a is equal to, let me go ahead and store scalar inside this. Now let me check the type of this. So it'll be type of a, and as you see, this is a string. So if I want to store a string type of value inside a variable, I'll just use double quotes. Now, again, string, it's not necessary that you store it only in double quotes. You can have strings with single quotes, double quotes, as well as triple quotes. So let me just show that to you. So here I've created a string using double quotes. Similarly, I'll go ahead and create another string by using single quotes. Now here, let me just write down S over here. I'll check type of B. Again, this is a string. Now, if I want a multi-line string, I can use triple quotes. So inside C, what I'll do is I'll have triple quotes over here. Here I'll write down this is, let me write this properly over here. So it'll be this is scalar academy. And I will go ahead and execute this. Now, let me check the type of this. The type of C, this is a string. Now I will print this out. Print of C. And when I print this out, you will see that this is Scalar Academy. All of these are coming in different lines. So what I'm essentially doing is creating strings, but you can create a string using single quotes, double quotes, or even triple quotes. So we have stored values of an integer, we have stored values of a string. Now let's go ahead and work with Boolean values. What are Boolean values? Boolean basically stands for 0, 1, yes, no, true, false. Now, whenever you're making certain decisions in life, those decisions somehow are binary. I'm not saying that all of the decisions are binary, but some of the decisions in your day-to-day life are binary, isn't it? So let's say it's raining outside and you have to make a decision of whether you have to go out and play football or not. So it's a yes or no question. Should I go out and play football? Yes or no? As simple as that. So this is where we will use true and false, and these are Boolean values. Now for this, let me go ahead and create another variable over here. I'll have something called as var3, and inside var3, I'll go ahead and store true. So here you'd have to remember that with Boolean values which are true and false, your T and F have to be capital, right? Now let's say if I give it as small t, then it will not be accepted as a keyword. If it has to be accepted as a keyword, then you'd have to give T as capital. So var3 is equal to true. Now that this is done, let me go ahead and again check the type of this. So type of var3, and you see that this is of Boolean type. Similarly, let me go ahead and change this. So now var3, let me actually have var4 over here. So I'll have var4 is equal to false. Then I'll have type of var4, and you shall see that this again is a Boolean value. Simple stuff, isn't it? So let me just go ahead and check if there are any more questions in the chat window over here. Karthik says, hello, Bharani. Hey, Karthik, welcome to the session. Pratyush says, hello. Hey. Pooja is asking, can I become a data scientist if I only know Python? That is a really good question, Pooja. So to answer that, a programming language is just one of the pillars if you'd want to become a data scientist. There are other pillars as well. Now, what are those? Now, the most important part if you'd want to become a data scientist would be mathematics and statistics fundamentals. So, mathematics and statistics are really important because these form the core of data science. And without this, you cannot become a data scientist. And now, again, in your ninth grade or 10th grade, you would have learned about basic statistics such as measures of central tendency, measures of deviation, and so on. But if you want to become a proper data scientist, this is not enough. You'd have to know more about this. So you'd have to know concepts such as normal distribution, probability distribution. Then you'd have to know something called as hypothesis testing and so on. So all of these statistics concepts and probability concepts you'd have to know properly. Now, apart from maths, you'd have to know the core CS concepts as well. Again, programming language is just one part of it. Apart from this, you would have to know probably a bit of database systems. You would have to know about operating systems as well. Because again, if you have to work around with data, what you're doing is essentially working with a lot of database systems. And also you'd need to have proper knowledge of OS aspects as well. So, apart from programming language, proper mathematics foundations, then you need to know OS concepts as well. And the main part is obviously your machine learning and deep learning skills. So, obviously, you cannot become a data scientist if you're not able to forecast something or if you're not able to predict something, isn't it? This is where all of your ML fundamentals come in. You would have to know about different ML algorithms such as linear regression, logistic regression, decision tree, naive Bayes, and so on. And all of these, again, remember that just implementing with Python is not enough. You'd have to understand the mathematical foundation of all of these algorithms, and you need to be able to implement these by yourself from scratch. So, all of these things combined will make you a good data scientist. So, I hope that answers your question, Pooja. Somnath is asking for computer scientist, which skills are required. Now, when you say computer scientist, I believe you're asking about computer vision. Now, again, computer vision, you can just consider it to be an advanced domain in the field of ML. So here you need to have proper skills of image processing, and especially what you need to know is something called as convolutional neural networks. Now, in artificial neural networks, you have something called as recurrent neural networks and convolutional neural networks. And if you want to become a or if you would want to deep dive into the field of computer vision, what you need to properly know is about convolutional neural networks and how to work around with them, right? So I'll probably give around to certain terms and just go ahead and Google them, right? Search something called as a ResNet. Right? Just after this session, you can just go ahead and search what is a ResNet and how is it used in the field of computer vision or maybe image processing, and you'll have more idea on this. Okay. So now that we have covered certain questions, so folks keep putting down your questions in the chat. I'll parallelly take them up. Now, what I'd want to do is I'd want to continue with the session. Also, parallelly, I'll keep taking up your questions. So we have looked at data types, we've looked at variables. Now, after this, let's go ahead and work around with operators. So again, what are operators? You can perform simple operations. And here, the primary type of operators would be arithmetic operators. And when it comes to arithmetic operators, what you're basically doing is addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. Extremely simple stuff. Let me go ahead and cut out all of these rows over here and let's have a fresh page. Here I'll have two variables. I'll have one variable called as a and I'll store the value of 10 inside this. Then after this, I'll have another variable called as b and I'll store the value of, let's say, 100 inside this. So I've got these two variables set. Now, if I want to add these two, extremely simple. All I have to do is write down a plus b and I'll get the result 110. Now, similarly, let's say if I want to do something else instead of addition, let's have a simple subtraction over here. I'll have a minus b, I'll get minus 90. Here it is minus 90 because you're doing 10 minus 100. And since 100, the value is higher than 10, and it is on the right side, you'll get a minus 90 over here. Now, instead of a minus b, if I were to execute b minus a, I'll get a 90 value over here because what you're doing is 100 minus 10. Then we'll go ahead and perform multiplication. So I'll have a star b over here. And when I perform a star b, I get the value of 1000 because 100 into 10 is 1000. Now let's go ahead and perform a divided by b. So a divided by b is 0.1 because 10 divided by 100 is 0.1. Similarly, let's just perform the last operation over here, which is b divided by a. So 100 by 10 gives you 10. So simple operations, this was arithmetic operators. So arithmetic operators, we just looked at plus, minus, then multiplication. Then we have something called as a division. Now, let's go ahead and look at relational operators. So let me add a comment over here, relational operators. And in relational operators, I have the greater than symbol. I would have the less than symbol. I would also have the not equal to symbol over here. So let's understand these first. Now, if I were to compare A and B, again, A I have 10, B I have 100. And now, if I want to check if A is less than B, I'll hit enter, I get a true. What is happening over here? I have A and B, which are the operands, and in between that I've put in the less than operator, and I'm checking if the value which is stored in A is less than the value which is stored in B. So it's 10 less than 100. That is true, and since that is true, I get this particular result. Now if I were to flip this, instead of the less than operator, if I were to put in the greater than operator over here and I execute this, I get a false value. Now this is false because 10 is obviously not greater than 100. Again, let me change this. I will have the not equal to operator over here. So this particular symbol or combination of symbols which you see, which is the exclamation mark and the equal to mark, so this is known as the not equal to operator. I get a true value over here because 10 is obviously not equal to 100. And then finally, we have something called as double equal to operator. So with the help of double equal to operator, we can just check if the values which are stored in both the variables are equal or not. So here I'll just put in two equal to symbols over here. I'll get a false value because 10 is obviously not equal to 100. All right. So now this is set. Next, we'll go ahead and work with, so we are done with relational operators. Next, we'll go ahead and work with something called as conditional operators, which are and or. So here, let me just add and or. Let me write this. This pipe operator, which you see, this is known as the or operator. Now, these logical operators or conditional operators, you understand that. So this will act as a logic gate. Now, what is a logic gate? On the basis of your operands, you'll either get true or false. Now, the AND operator, let's start with this. The AND operator will give you a true result only when both of your operands are true. So let me write down that logic properly over here. So let's say if I have true false and will give you false. Similarly, if you have false true and will again give you false. Next, again, if we let's say have false and will again give you false. And then the only case where and will give you a true operator is when you have true and true. So when you put in this particular operator, right, when you put in the and operator in between true and true, that is when you'll get a true result. So let's go ahead and perform this. So this time I will store, let me actually delete all of this over here, make up fresh space for you guys. I have this variable called as a. Inside this, I will store true. Then going ahead, I have this variable b. Inside this, I will store the value false. So I've got these two set. Going ahead, I will perform a and b. A and b is false because true and false is false. Let me interchange them. I will have b and a. B and A would also be false because B is false, A is true. False and true will become false. Next, going ahead, I will have B and B. B and B is also false because false and false is also false. And then finally, I shall have A and A. As you see, we get a true result. So the AND operator will give you a true result when both of the operands are true. Next up, we have the OR operator. So the OR operator is the exact opposite of your AND operator, and this will give you a true result when either of the operands is true. Here, if you have true and false, you will get a true result. Then if you have a false and a true, again you'll get a true result. Next up, you have true and true. And since both of them are true, you'll obviously get a true result. Finally, the only case when you'll get a false result when you're working with the OR operator is this one. So this is the only case where you'll get a false when you're working with OR operator. Again, let me delete this over here. So I have true in A, false in B. Let me put in those operators. So I'll have A or B. I get a true result because true or false is true. Let me flip those and I will have B or A. B or A, again, it's true. Then I will have A or A, again, this will be true. And then finally, let me change this to B. So it'll be B or B and this will be false because false or false is false. Right. So we have looked at the different types of operators over here. Let me get back to chat and see if there are any questions over here. So Karthik is asking, I have a doubt. Can I implement DS algo problems with Python? Absolutely yes. So Karthik, again, understand that data structures, algorithms, these are this will help you to build up your problem solving skills, and it's not limited to just one particular programming language. So again, the choice of weapon, that is totally upon you. If you like C++, you can use C++. If you like C, you can use C. If you like Java, you can use Java. Similarly, if you like Python, you can use Python, right? So whatever language you're comfortable with, you can use any of these languages to implement problems on DS and Algo. So I hope that answers your question. Health Effect team is asking, I'm an absolute beginner when it comes to coding even. I want to take up a programming language. Is Python a good option? I'd say Python is one of the best options out there, right? Because Python is also one of the easiest languages to learn. When you compare Python with a language called as C++ or maybe even C, I'd say the learning curve is a bit longer, and also the syntax for Python is much more easier, and also the applications or the industry use for Python is much larger. There's a wide variety of uses or wide variety of applications for Python when compared to other languages. So as a beginner, if you'd want to start off, then I'll definitely recommend Python. Dimple is asking, is there good scope for Python in India? Absolutely. So again, Dimple, you'd have to understand that the region wouldn't matter over here. It would totally depend on the project that particular company is working on. And Python is, again, one of the most popular languages used to implement a wide variety of projects. So you have a lot of ML AI startups in India, and these MLAI startups pay a lot. And if you'd want to get into these companies, obviously you need to know Python. And that just again just one requirement. It's not that if you know Python you'll get into this. That is one requirement. If you check that up, you will have other checklist options as well, right? So Python is a good starter, and also if you'd want to earn really well, then Python is something which I'll definitely recommend. But also remember that Python is not the only skill set which will get you that great SD roles or data scientist roles. There are other skills which you'd have to develop along with your Python skills as well. Okay, folks. So now that this is done, let's again go back to our session for today. Again, you can keep putting up your questions in the chat window. I will parallelly take them up. So we are done till operators. Let me go ahead and cut these up. Now we'll work with something called as flow control statements. Or before that, let's actually work with the different data structures in Python, isn't it? Because that would be more intuitive. Now, till now we've only worked with variables, and in variable we were able to store only one value at a time. But what if I wanted to store multiple values at a time? Then we have these different options. Let me write those down for you. We have something called as a tuple, we have a list, we have a set, and then we have something called as a dictionary. So these are the four different types of data structures which Python provides to store multiple items or multiple elements at a single time. Let's start off with the simplest one out of these data structures, which is a tuple. Again, let me add in the comment over here, tuple. What exactly is a tuple? Tuple is a collection of elements. Let's start off there. Now, what sort of elements or what sort of collection of elements can you store? Now, that collection could be anything. It could be a collection of numbers, it could be a collection of strings, or it could be a combination of strings and numbers. And how do you create a tuple? You create a tuple by using your round braces or normal braces. And one thing you'd have to keep in mind about a tuple is immutable. Now, what does immutable mean? It means that once you create a tuple, you cannot alter it or cannot change it, right? So once you create a tuple, that's it. That is what you will be using for the rest of your program. Let's go ahead and create our first tuple. So I'll write something called as T1 over here, and let me just put in some elements. I'll have Let me write down. I'll have 10, 20, 30, 40, and 50. Let me check the type of it. Type of T1, and you would see that Python interpreter over here shows me that this is a tuple type object. And now I've created this. Again, I've told you that it's not necessary that you can only store integer type values. Let me go ahead and have characters over here. So this time I will have, let me put in these braces over here. I'll have A, B, C, D, and let me also write down E. So these are all the values which are present in this tuple. Now let me print out T1 for you guys. So again, since all of these are data structures, but then again, remember that these are types of variables because you can change the values which are stored inside this. Now, if I check the type of T1, again, this is a tuple. So this is clear. Now, you might have a question. I've stored multiple values over here. How can I extract individual elements from this tuple? So here we have something called as indexing. So each value would be present at a particular index. And when I given that index value, I'll be able to extract those elements. So in Python, you'd have to remember that the indexing starts from 0. Here, this A or the first element is present at index number 0. B over here is present at index number 1. C is present at index number 2. D is present at index number 3. And E is present at index number 4. Now, if I want to extract A, this is how I'll do it. I'll write down T1. I'll give in the square braces over here. And I'll give in the index value, which is 0. And as you see, so since this element A is present at index number 0, as soon as I given this value, I'm able to extract this. Similarly, if I want to extract the second element, remember that the second element is present at index number 1. I'll change this, I'll make it 1. And when I print out, you see that I've extracted this. And now, if I want to extract the last element, now if I want to extract the last element from this tuple, it's easy because I can just count it. But what if I had more than 500 elements and I did not know the exact number of elements? So in that case, if I want to extract the last element, I'll just give in -1 over here. And as you see, when I give in -1, I have extracted the last element from this tuple, which is E. If I'd want to extract the second last element, I can give in -2, which is the second element from the last. And you would see that I've extracted D from over here. Simple stuff. Okay. Now, if I'd want to extract three elements or let's say multiple elements at the same time, so I'd want to extract A, B, and C. So A is present at index number 0. C would be present at 0, 1, and 2. But I will give in 3 over here. Now, why is that? Because your initial value is inclusive, but your final value is exclusive. Now, what does that mean? Let's say, so here 0, 1, 2. C is present at index number 2, but if I give in only 2 over here, what will happen is this tuple will only take the elements which are present at index number 0 and index number 1. But I'd want the value which is present at index number 2 as well. So that is why I need to give in 3. Right? So in again, probably in your primary school, you would have you'd have learnt about the concepts of inclusive brackets and exclusive brackets. So here the final value or the last value is exclusive, and that is why you need to give a value higher than this. So T1, 0 to 3, you'll get A, B, and C. Let me go back to the chat and see if there are any more questions. Priya is asking, ggplot2 in R is better than matplotlib and Python. So the short answer would be yes. The long answer would be because R is considered to be a much more preferred language when it comes to data visualization when you compare it with Python. So ggplot2 also, it is based on something called as grammar of graphics, right? It is a library which is based on top of grammar of graphics. Now, if you want to speak any language, whether it is English, Hindi, Marathi, or whatever language it is based on some grammar, right? So if you want to speak proper English, you need to know proper grammar. Now, if you'd want to create beautiful visualization, so again, languages, understand that visualization is also a type of language. And if you'd want to create beautiful visualization, you need to know the underlying language or underlying grammar properly. So this is where, since ggplot2 is by built on top of the fundamentals of grammar of graphics, it's normally considered to be a much more better visualization tool than your matplotlib. So I hope that answers your question, Priya. Somnath is asking, sir, can you explain how to write algorithm and pseudocode? Sure. So again, I'll not go into the depth of it, but simply put, let's say where you're trying to write an algorithm, the first point what you need to start off with is to understand the problem statement properly, right? Read the problem statement 2 to 3 times, understand what are the input variables, understand what is the output. If that is something which you're clear with, your rest of the program or rest of the pseudocode becomes easy. Now, many times what happens is people start with the algorithm or the pseudocode directly without understanding the problem statement itself. And this is why, so let's say if the problem statement requires you to give two outputs, but if you don't read the if you don't read the problem statement properly, and if you're walking out towards only one single output, then there itself your approach is wrong. So understand how many inputs are required, what are the constraints in the problem statement. So if you understand the constraints over there, you will have your inputs with respect to or in alignment with those constraints. And then finally understand how many outputs are required. So these would be the three fundamentals which you'd have to remember when you're writing down an algorithm. Okay. So now that we've understood about a tuple, now we've created a tuple over here, and we've also extracted elements from this tuple. Now I've added, so when I was starting off with tuple, I've told you guys that, sorry guys, I'm just a bit under the weather. So as I was saying, when I started off with tuple, I told you guys that tuple is an immutable object. And that would mean that once I create this tuple, I cannot change whatever is present inside it. So T1, when I print it out, this is what I have. Let me again remove all of these rows from over here. So this is what I have, T1, all of these elements. Now from this, let's say if I want to change the element which is present at index number 0. So T1, 0, instead of A, I'd want to store the value Z. I get the error. And what does the error say? Tuple object does not support item assignment. A very simple intuitive error, isn't it? So if you read this, you understand what is the problem. Tuple object does not support item assignment. And that is the fundamental nature of a tuple. Once you create a tuple, you cannot change it. You cannot alter it. Now, understanding this problem, we have another data structure which is called a list. So it's quite similar to a tuple. Again, with the help of a list, you can store multiple values inside this. You can have all integers, all strings, or a combination of strings and integers, or even other data types inside that. And a list is considered to be immutable, and you create that list using square braces. So let's go ahead and create our list over here. I'll write down this comment and I'll call this list as L1. And inside L1, let me pass in some values. So let's say I will have, I'll write down scalar, then I'll have academy. I'll write is the best. Right, so I've created this list which has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 words over here, and this is pretty much the list. Let me print it out for you guys, and this is how it looks like. Now again, if I'd want to extract individual values from this, I'll write down L1, 0, I've extracted scalar. L1, 1, I've extracted academy. Let's say if I put in L1 minus 1 over here, I've extracted best. Now, over here, as I said, you can alter a list. Here, L1 of minus 1. So the last element here I have best. So instead of Scalar Academy is the best, let me change it to something else. Instead of best, let me probably put it as greatest. Now, let me print out L1 over here. So as you see over here, item assignment is possible for a list. Initially, I had created a list where the last item or the element was best. And here, using this assignment, I've changed the value from best to greatest. So this is what differentiates between a tuple and a list. Now going ahead, we'll look at two different data structures. So we have something called as a dictionary. So can anyone in the chat tell me what you understand by a dictionary? Let me write down the spelling properly over here. So there are a couple of questions. So again, before I go ahead with the dictionary, can anyone tell me what you understand by a dictionary in Python? Garima is asking, do I need to learn Python to become a data analyst? The answer would probably be no, because it would again depend on the job role. So, as a data analyst, normally what you'll be doing is you'll be working with SQL or Excel, and the requirement of Python is sort of less. But then again, you need to know basics of Python as well. But then again, if the question is simple, can you become a data analyst without knowing Python? The answer is yes. And there are a lot of companies out there where the requirement is knowing languages, the other languages, which would be SQL, Excel, and maybe even R. Somnath is asking, why do we use tuple if there is list? That's a really good question, Somnath. Now, understand that, let's say if you're creating data, sometimes you would need data which is unalterable, isn't it? Because there would be some sensitive information, and once you create it, you would want to stay it as it is. Let's say this could be, you might be storing, let's say you have a bank account and you would be storing the transactions of your bank account, or you might be storing the salary details of a person, and you want that to be as it is. And you basically, like, only whenever there is only minor change, you want that to be changed, else it should stay as it is. So this is where you will have tuples, right? Once you create it, let it stay as it is. Or maybe another example would be, let's say, your date of birth, right? So your date of birth cannot change, it is fixed. So let's say if you're born on 1st January 2000, now that date of birth will stay fixed. If I want to create a column, or maybe if I, let's say there are 100 employees, and I want to store all of their date of births. Now here, the right option would be to use a tuple, because once I store these date of births, these 100 date of births, no one can go ahead and alter these. This would be fixed. So that would totally depend on what is it that you're trying to implement. So let's say if you want your data to stay as it is, you'll go ahead and use a tuple. But then again, if you feel that you'd want to alter your data, you'll go ahead and use a list. Yugendra is saying collection of key value pairs. That's right, Yugendra. Healthific team just says dictionary question mark. So that is what I'll be covering right now. Okay, awesome. So folks, again, keep putting down your questions in the chat. I will take them up. So now that this is clear, so dictionary, so Yugendra has rightly pointed out, it's just key value pairs. Now, key value pairs, how do we put them up? We put them up inside your curly braces. Let me create a dictionary like this. I'll have D1 and I'll put in curly braces over here. And inside this, since there are key value pairs, let's just keep it very literal. I'll write the first key as key 1, and then this key will have a certain value associated with it. Let me put in the value as 20. Then let me have the second key. I'll call the second key as key 2 and I'll set the value for this as 20. Then I'll have the third key over here. Let me call this key 3 and I'll set in a value for this which would be equal to 30. So what I've done over here, I've created a dictionary. Now let me print out this dictionary for you guys. So now that I've created this dictionary, so again, key 1, key 2, key 3 are your keys, 10, 20, 30 are your values. If I'd want to individually extract the keys and values, there are methods for that. Here, I'll just write down d1 dot keys, and when I use this, you would see that I've extracted the keys from this key 1, key 2, and key 3. Similarly, when I have d1 dot values over here, you will see that I've extracted 10, 20, and 30, which are basically the values. So this is how you'll work with a dictionary. Now again, dictionary, can you alter it? Yes. So if I want to add a new key to this, I'll write down d1, I'll put in square braces over here, and what I'll do is inside this, I'll add the new key. Let me call this as key 4. And inside key 4, I will pass in the value of 40. Now that I've done this, if I print in D1, you will see that the value has changed. Right? So now the value of 40 is stored inside this key 4. And again, if I want to change some value which is there. So right now the value of key 3 is 30. If I want to change that, that also can be done. So I'll have D1. Inside this, I'll give in the key name, which is key 3. And the value would be changed to 100 instead of 30. So when I print down D1 over here, as you see, initially the value of key 3 was equal to 30. I've changed that to 100. So this is how we are working with dictionaries over here. Again, let me go ahead and delete all of this. So this was dictionary. Now let's go ahead to a set. So this would be the final data structure in Python. And here a set, again, you create using curly braces. And what is so special about a set? In a set, you can store only unique values or unique elements. Let me show that to you. S1, inside this, I'll have A, B, let me have B 3 times. And then let me also give in C, I'll give that 4 times, right? So I've given A twice, B thrice, and C 4 times. Let me execute this. Let me print out as 1. You would see that I've got only A, B, and C. And that is because in a set, you can store only unique elements. So folks, these are the different data structures which are there in Python. Now, again, that this is clear, we'll go with something else. So let's understand the different flow control statements in Python. Let me remove all of this. Let me write down another comment over here. Flow control statements. And in flow control statements, you'll have decision-making statements and you have looping statements. Decision-making statements, as the name states, you can make a particular decision on the basis of a condition. Here you have something called as if else. Now there could be a lot of examples over here. Let's say a very simple example would be, if you get salary, then probably buy a pizza, right? So let's say this is the end of the month, and this is also the Diwali season. Today is first, isn't it, right? So let's say if you haven't got your salary on 31st, then this entire week you'll not be getting your salary, and unfortunately you'll not be able to buy sweets for your family or buy a pizza, right? So let's say you're just waiting for your salary, and the condition is if you get salary, then you go ahead and party, or you go ahead and buy a pizza. So here, the if else clause, we can use it for multiple scenarios in programming paradigm as well. Now, let me understand some of this. Let's say I have two variables over here. I'll have A. In A, let me store the value 30. Then I have B. And in B, let me store the value 50. I've got these two set. Now that this is done, what do I want to do? I do want to check if B is greater than A. And if B is greater than M, so also folks have a keen look at the syntax, right? So here you will given a colon. So if is the keyword, then inside these braces you will given the condition which is B is greater than M. After that you will given a colon, and also have a glance at this tab over here, right? There needs to be proper alignment when you're working with the if statement. So A is 30, B is 50, and if B is greater than A, what do I want to do? Print, I'll just maybe print out B is greater than A. And this is what we get. So this condition inside the if statement has been satisfied. We enter the body of if statement and we print this out. But on the other hand, let's say if this condition would have been false. Let me flip the condition over here. If B is less than A. So is 50 less than 30? No, that is evaluated to false. And since that is evaluated to false, when I go ahead and try to execute this, right? So as you see, I'm trying to execute this, but I do not get a result because since this is evaluated to false, I will skip whatever is present inside the body of this if statement. So for this, whenever the if statement is evaluated to false, we have something else, and that is called as else. So I'll write down else over here. So if B is less than A, print this else. What I'd want to do, I'd want to print out if condition has failed. Let's understand this chronology over here. So if B is less than A, this condition is being checked. So is 50 less than 30? No. Since that is false, I will skip whatever is present inside the if statement and I will enter the else statement over here. So what is present inside the else statement? If condition has failed, and I'll just go ahead and print that out. So this is how you can work with if else statements. Now, again, if else can also be used to maybe compare the values of three different numbers. So let me have three different numbers over here. I'll have var1 inside this. Let me store the value of 100. Then I'll have var2 inside this. I'll store 200. Then I'll have var3 inside this. I'll store 300. So now that I've created these three variables, what I'd want to do is, let's say, yeah, so now that I've done this, I'd want to compare the values. So first I'll give in the if statement, and using the if statement, I'll just check var1 is greater than var2. So if var1 is greater than var2, I will use this AND operator, and I'll also check if var1 is greater than var3. So if 100 is greater than 200 and also 100 is greater than 300, then you'd have to do something. Also, let me put these in proper braces over here. Let me remove this. Let me add a brace over here. And let me also add a brace over here. This is set. And if this evaluates to true, what do I want to do? I want to print out var1 is the greatest. Now, if this evaluates to false, what do I want to do? I will have something called as elif. So else if this condition has failed, else if I will give in another condition. What is that condition? Now I am checking if var2 is greater than var1 and also var2 is greater than var3. So var2 is greater than var1, and I'll give in these two braces over here, var2 is greater than var3 as well. So if this is evaluated to true, I'll just go ahead and print out over here var2 is the greatest. If this also fails, I can go ahead to the final else statement. And in the final else statement, I can just go ahead and print out var3 is the greatest. Let me print this out. So this is done over here. So seems like we've got an error over here. I need to put in a proper brace over here. Right. So here, as you see, let's understand this entire logic properly. So we'll start off with the if statement, and in the if statement, this condition is being checked. So is 100 greater than 200? False. Is 100 greater than 300? False. False and false will give you a false. And since this entire thing is evaluated to false, we'll skip this body of if statement. We'll come down to LF. And here we are checking if 200 is greater than 100. Is that true? Yes. Next, we'll check if 200 is greater than 300. That is false. So true and false is false. And since this is also false, we'll skip this. Finally, we'll come to the else statement. And since there is no condition checking over here, I'll just go ahead and print out where is the greatest. So basic stuff again. Let me go ahead to the chat and see if there are any more questions. Healthific team is asking, can Python be used for deep learning applications? Yes, absolutely. So some of your deep learning frameworks now, that could be TensorFlow, Keras, all of these deep learning frameworks are actually built on top of Python. And if you want to work with these deep learning frameworks, then Python is actually recommended as the necessary language. Right. So all of your implementation of neural networks, whether that is simple neural networks or convolutional neural networks, all of these can be done by using Python. If you'd want to read up more on that, you can just Google a bit on TensorFlow and Keras. Right. So these are two of the most widely used deep learning frameworks. Let me see if there are any more questions over here. So, folks, I'd want more questions in the chat. I want this to be quite interactive. If you have any questions, please put them up in the chat window. I will take them up. Okay. Um, so, since we are done with this, also seems like we are running out of time. So, what we'll do is we've got another 3-4 minutes. We'll cover one last concept, which would probably be functions in Python. So, what exactly is a function? Now, if you'd want to create an application which is modular in nature, you would need the help of functions. A simple example for this would be your calculator. So, for your calculator, what happens, right? So, uh, let's take the simple calculator application on your phone. When you click on the plus button, what is happening? Two numbers are added. When you click on the minus button, two numbers are subtracted. When you click on the division button, two numbers are divided. Now, all of these are again modular, which would mean that if you'd want to pick and select individual applications of your entire program, you can do that using functions. So, calculator is your entire application, that is your project. So, let's say if you want to create a major project and that major project is titled as calculator, that calculator can be divided into different modules. One module could be performing addition, another module could be performing subtraction, another module could be performing multiplication, and so on. And this is where functions come into the rescue. So let's go ahead and create a very simple function over here. And in Python, if you'd want to work with functions, you have something called as def, which would stand for definition. So we are, in essence, creating or defining a method. So I'll write down def, and you'd have to give in the name of the method. So let's say I'd want to create a method which would add 100 to the given number. Let's call this method as add 100. This takes in a parameter, and what it would basically do is print x plus 100. So this is the body of the method. Now that we have created this, let's go ahead and invoke this. I'll have add 100. Inside this, if I pass in the value of 5, you would see that I have a returned value of 105. Similarly, if I pass in 50 inside this, I have 150. What has happened over here? Basically, this is the function. I passed in an input. So to that input, 100 was added, and we have a value of 150. So this is pretty much about functions. Let me see if there are any more questions. Punita is asking, explain about errors and how to debug them. So Punita probably will cover that in another session of ours. What you can do is just put that down as a comment over here, and we'll take that up in the next class because that will take up a bit of time. So folks, if you found the session to be insightful, give me a quick thumbs up. Let me know in the chat if you like the session, and if you want us to conduct these live sessions on a regular basis. Also, please put that down over here. And if you haven't yet liked or subscribed to our channel, please go ahead and do that. So if you found the session insightful, please share this video with your peers. Let your peers know that we regularly upload high quality tutorials on our channel, and ask them to follow Scalar Academy. So thank you very much, folks, and also wishing you guys a very happy Diwali. And on that note, I'll sign off. Thank you.